All right, how is everyone doing today? Welcome to my channel, and I do educational videos, and we try to check out great theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, grand unified theories, cosmologies, and then also we take a look at tour de forces, grand magnum opuses, and earth-shattering discoveries, and mainly from obscure sources, things that you probably haven't heard of, or if you have heard of them, you don't know much about them. And these are things that I think that can change your life. A lot of these people are my heroes because they, not even necessarily that I agree with them about everything, but just because they stuck by their guns and they believed in something and they did the research and they put out a great book or some other type of presentation, music or a game or a video or something, and mostly books. And they still never got any credit. Nobody ever paid them, but they did it. And they had to kind of arrive at a new language to express a lot of new ideas, and they took a lot of heat for what they did, and they became very unpopular because they went against the the consensus worldview, and they very much kind of exposed people that were in that worldview, so they were a threat, and so they usually got hit with a lot of ad hominem attacks, and the general idea of killing the messenger, ignoring their message. Now, back in the day, Giordano Bruno got burnt at the stake. These days, most people aren't getting burnt at the stake, but their lives can still get destroyed. We are in our third major segment of this channel. We did about 300 some videos on ancient Egyptian tree of life, almost 600 videos on Dewey B. Larson's reciprocal system of theory, which is, I think, the most thorough and elegant theory of everything out there from the 20th century. And Larson really does great work in kind of unifying all of the major fields of science, and also unifying science with religion. So we're taking his reciprocal title and we're applying it to religion. His chapter on religion will probably be, also considered strongly here, but we are looking at many other sources that you can use in your own life to accentuate your spiritual journey, your path, your attempt to get closer to the divine, however you think about that. We've looked at ecstatic music and dance. We have looked at endurance training, like long distance, intense endurance training to get to that second win or the runner's high, the peace inside the pain, and the zone. This can also be done with very deep meditation, also through entheogens, and we've taken a look at a little bit of that, a lot of the deep Buddhist meditation with the maps that they provide. And we're going to be checking out in depth some sacred geometry and sacred mathematics. The Tree of Life is more or less sacred geometry as well. And we're going to look at some other things, maybe some astronomy, astrology, that Dewey Larson might appear again. And probably quite a few other things, but we feel like this is a need because we recognize that the 5 major Western religions are all on their deathbed, and they are about to collapse under their own weight of lies and propaganda. In particular, we're looking at the New Testament right now. So when I refer to the 5 Western religions, I'm saying Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Satanism, and atheism or scientism. And when we examine the New Testament, that's really taking out Christianity and Satanism. Satanism mainly stems from the New Testament. There's not much Satanism in the Old Testament. People talk about Moloch and Baal and Baphomet or whatever. Those are gods with a small g. They're competitors to Yahweh, who is also God with a small g. They are just principality, strongmen. They're not. They are like in the flesh. But Satanism comes in with the New Testament, but really is even more of a matter from Dante and Milton and Hollywood. But the thing is about the Satanists is that they are a reaction to the Christians. They hate the Christians so much that they have turned the New Testament into a mockery of the Christians, which is actually what it is. Because if you study the New Testament, not study the text, but study the context of the New Testament. Where did it come from? What language was it written in? Where was it distributed? Who wrote it? And all of these questions, it becomes very obvious that the New Testament was written by the Roman Caesars, the only people that could have written it. They were the only people that knew Greek well enough to write it. They were the only people who had the resources to distribute it. They were the only people that, and to also make so many different copies of it. And they had a total monopoly on what was published and where and what it said. They had full power over the Roman Empire, which included Judea at this time. So the New Testament was written by the Flavian Caesars. That is Emperor Vespasian, Emperor Titus, and Emperor Domitian between 69 and 96 AD. They did it as a form of wartime propaganda or psychological operation against the Jews, who they had been fighting off and on in wars for over 100 years. And the Jews were just not assimilating into the Roman Empire because they had the separatist monotheistic God with all of these idiosyncratic rituals, graven images and kosher food laws and circumcision and all these animal sacrifices, Passover, and so on. And they were willing to die for these rituals. And so they were willing to go to war with the Romans. And the Romans had hundreds of other nations under their empire, and they just didn't have the resources to be fighting wars all over the place like that, over just little, ritualistic kind of things. So they wanted to propose a new Jew, a Jewish hero, and even a savior who was a prince of peace, who believed in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, who believed in turning the other cheek to oppression, who believed that the Roman slave owners' faith was the greatest in all Judea, and who believed in walking an extra mile with the Roman soldier's backpack. And so that's what they did. If you examine, you will see that Jesus really does nothing against Rome and says nothing against Rome throughout the entire Gospels, but he slams the Jews many, many, many times. And so he's an attempt from the Jews, from the Romans, to mellow out the Jews. Eventually, they wrote the Pauline epistles, and that was an attempt to spread that whole thing out to the Roman slaves as well as the Roman soldiers and other commoners. Incidentally, their methods did not really work very well, but brute force, wins out in the end. And it took about 3 centuries or 2.5 centuries before Constantine pretty much mandated this. But Constantine is in the direct line genetically of the people that wrote this. Now, the main person that's involved in this is a pseudonym. They called him Josephus. He wrote a book, a 7-volume work called War of the Jews, or Jewish War, and it had to do with this war that both Vespasian and Titus participated in as commanders from 66 to 73 AD. And he wrote the history of this. He was writing from his townhouse at the Caesar's Palace, where he lived as the court historian. And when you take a look at Jewish War, you can see that the parallels are somewhat unescapable between Jewish War and the Gospels. And we're looking at an author right here named Michael Menescatz, who has a new book out called Christianity's Origins as a Flavian Secrecy Cult. Josephus was an adopted member of the Flavians. He was known as Flavius Josephus. And whoever he was is the same people who wrote the Gospels. So one of the major patterns involved is that Jesus had a 3-year ministry in Judea. And they wrote, the Gospels were written in the 70s and 80s AD, 70s, 80s, 90s AD. Josephus was writing at this same period. He wrote his Wars of the Jews in the 70s and his Antiquities of the Jews in the 90s. And but he backdated the Gospels by 40 years. So much of what Jesus predicts or prophesies for Jerusalem and for the future that we are all waiting for to come to pass via book of Revelation, those things have already happened. They were fulfilled by Titus in War of the Jews. Jesus has a 3-year ministry in Judea. Titus has a 3-year military campaign in Judea. Jesus's ministry is exactly 40 years before Titus's ministry. The things that Jesus predicts are going to happen in a symbolic manner are fulfilled literally by Titus. The places where Jesus predicts these events are fulfilled in those same places by Titus. Many times the dates that when they can be determined, the dates where Jesus makes those predictions are exactly 40 years away from the dates that Titus fulfills those predictions. Basically, Titus is the second coming of Jesus, if you believe Josephus, which is a history. Josephus is known by many as the greatest historian of Western civilization. So when you say who's telling the truth, you have to go with Josephus. He's talking about real events. But neither of them are talking about real events. What this is a mockery, and it's a mean-spirited form of propaganda to victimize Jews and other commoners. And it's mocking, it's bawdy, it's vulgar, it's pornographic, it's cannibalistic, it's violent and murderous, and it was written by psychopaths. The Romans were like the worst people that have ever lived on earth. They were complete degenerates, and they were utterly violent and military. Your scriptures were written by the worst people that have ever lived. But they put in a few nice verses in there, and that catches your eye. If you look at the whole thing in context and don't just focus on a verse here or a chapter there, then you can see it. But maybe you can't see it because you grew up with it and you have emotional connections with it. If your faith is strong enough, you will do the deep dive and get Josephus's War of the Jews online for free as a PDF. Get the Whiston translation, and then get the Loeb translation. And then get your Bible translation, preferably the Greek interlinear text, and go over it yourself. But what Menescats does is he goes over it for you, and he puts the book of Luke on the third gospel on the vertical axis, chapters 1 through 24, 1 at the bottom, 24 at the top, and puts Jewish war on the horizontal axis, paragraph 1 at the left, paragraph 694 at the far right, and he finds all the parallels between them, and he plots all the points of correspondence. He found 250 parallels between just in the book of Luke. And when he plotted all the points, they make 5 letters in Latin, APTVS, or possibly US. The upshot is that the Romans signed their name to the Gospels. So I don't know how much more coincidental you need, you diggers out there, and all you anons, and you followers of the 17th letter, and you guys are truthers. You're all, digging up and finding one psyop after another, and one conspiracy after another, and you actually do a great job of that. But for some reason, you just can't seem to apply it to your religion. But if you did, you would realize that you better find another religion. And don't choose any of the 4 other ones on the list, because I'm coming for them too, that being Judaism, Islam, and Satanism, and atheism or scientism. But so we're going to start here with Menescat's work, that he's kind of talking about the Essenes. Jesus was said to, by a lot of people, said to be an Essene, which is like a really devout sect of Jews that believed in vegetarianism and celibacy and giving away all their money. And he's kind of arguing that these Essenes never actually existed. The only mention of Essenes ever in literature are from Josephus and Philo of Alexandria, who is another insider to the Romans. He was a Jew, but he was married into the Roman Caesars. And who was the other? Pliny the Elder. And Pliny the Elder was also a good buddy of Titus. he dedicated his natural history to Titus, in fact. And these are the only 3 people in history that have ever actually mentioned the Essenes. So that falls flat pretty quick. That's the beauty of the Roman hypothesis of their authorship of the Bible, of the New Testament, is that it answers every question. Every question, because that's really what Christianity is based on. Christianity is based on Occam's razor, and, well, there is no better explanation, so how about we posit the virgin birth? It says virgin birth, and there's no better explanation, so we'll go with that. Bodily resurrection? Well, there's no better explanation, so we'll go with that. Well, the Roman hypothesis is the better explanation that you're looking for. There's no need to resort to any type of magical thinking or any type of miracles. It's just right down the center of the MO of what the Romans would do and what the Romans have done over and over again, creating religions, creating religious propaganda to, mollify the masses. In fact, they did the exact same thing to a different group of Jews, the Pharisees, with their land grant at Japhne that led to the Talmud, which is like a Pharisaic Jewish thing. It was exactly the same MO at the same time. So that's the thing about the Roman hypothesis, is that it's all-encompassing, and it explains absolutely everything, where the Christian hypothesis is just relying on there is no better explanation. So, okay. Admittedly, Jewish War diverges from the other 2 by saying that there were 2 versions of the Essene. One, Jewish War by Josephus, that there were 2 versions of the Essene, one of which admitted women, which brings us to the possibility that the pious model of the Essene is Roman government. The second and third sources listed earlier, Pliny and Philo, Pliny the Elder and Philo, appear to predate Vespasian's project, but may have been offering propaganda to provide a model for pious living to help convince Jews to tolerate their existence when enslaved or sent to work camps. However, Jewish War offers 2 models suggesting a new set of objectives. 1, the original model was to be held up for either the ranks of the legions and navy and or the mines, work camps, and probably the empire's slaves, who are thought to have made up about 10% of the population. And 2, the additional model offered by Jewish War, Josephus' Jewish War, which entails permitting fraternization with womenfolk, would be held up for the commoners in general, since growing the empire's economy is reliant upon people having lots of children. With this in mind, we can see how compatible Jewish War's version of the Essene is with the Flavians' target audiences. The cult would aim to attract Jews, commoners, Gentiles, and slaves to guide them into a hierarchical society where each class controls that below, with everyone being led toward pure Flavian emperor worship, meaning that you see Jesus as the Savior, but then you recognize that Jesus is actually predicting his second coming, and his second coming is Titus. And so you put Titus up above Jesus, but then you are finally tuned into the fact that Jesus is pure fiction, and that leads you into what he calls pure Flavian emperor worship. And the cults would also be used in the legions, the navy, and the Praetorian Guard to enforce the exact hierarchy needed for a strong chain of command, whilst convincing the believers that it was pious to live without access to women. Since the existence of, or at least the importance of, the hierarchical structure itself would be kept a secret, with newcomers only aware that there were senior ranks. An outsider or a new initiate would only have visibility of the beliefs of the lowest class. To outsiders, the name for this Essene-like sect was intended to be, according to Acts itself, simply Christianity. Thanks to Constantine's decision to promote faith in Jesus alone, the religion we know of as Christianity is completely different, with a belief system similar to that of the second rank of the secrecy cult, like believing in Jesus as Lord and Savior. Now, I'm kind of not really appreciating this aspect of the book because he's not focusing on the parallels, which I think is the real strength of the book. The parallels and the fact that it makes a bunch of Latin letters when you plot them out on a graph. But instead, he's speculating on who the Essenes are. And I hope it comes back to be more relevant, but he's got so much evidence, but he's speculating. Okay, now we're at chapter 8. Luke parodying Jewish war in reverse order, helping complete the V. Okay, so the right-hand side of the V is like in order in both books. Like as you move through one book, you go to the right, and as you move through the other book, you go up. So the right-hand side of the V is like events coming in order in both books. Joseph Atwill, in his book Caesar's Messiah, especially the Flavian signature version edition, documents all of those. There's like really like 40 some parallels that go all in a row, and it's pretty devastating. But this is, we're looking at the left-hand side of the V, which is the order, like as we move through War of the Jews, we're moving backwards in the book of Luke. So the first sequence of parallels I described involved parallels primarily between Jesus and the Flavians, many of which were essentially in the same order in the two documents. These presented, among other things, the right-hand side of the V in the APTVS pattern. I will now discuss further parallels between Jesus' story and Jewish war, which mostly do not equate both Jesus and the Flavian emperors themselves, and which are arranged in essentially reverse order in the two documents. These are arranged to present the left-hand side of the V. I acknowledge and apologize that some readers will already know of some of these, since they were described in Joseph Atwill's extraordinary book, Caesar's Messiah, which we've talked about that in past videos quite a bit, and probably will do so more. It is extraordinary. And Shakespeare's Secret Messiah, his second book, is also. My survey discovered many others, which I include too. And unlike Joseph Atwill's book, my main purpose here is to show that they are arranged in a clearly intentional pattern. I suppose I can't rule out that a minority of the following parallels which relate Jesus with Titus might be shown to the worshipers upon attaining the third rank of the secrecy cult, meaning the rank where they are taught that Titus is the second coming. However, at least the majority of what follows would only have been shown to the worshipers who had attained the fourth and most senior rank of the cult, in order to help reveal the full APTVS pattern and to show that Luke and Jewish war had to have been written together, and therefore the government, or Titus, had written Luke, and that Jesus was therefore merely a fictional parable about their divine God, Titus, after all. Okay, so he starts out here with Rome's invasion of Judea, and how Jesus' story parodies it in Luke. So we start out with Jewish War, paragraph 420, which is book 3, chapter 7, paragraph 30. Around Jerusalem, Titus ordered the raising of earthen banks. He dug trenches around the city. In Luke chapter 19, verses 37 to 47, approaching Jerusalem, Jesus said, "The days shall come, your enemies will cast a trench about you and encompass you around." Here we start with a fairly simple parallel. Despite not having much impressive detail, even Christian scholars widely recognize that Jesus appears to be talking about Titus's future siege of Jerusalem. It's fairly transparent. And now we move to another short parallel, which is from Jewish War 454, book 4, chapter 1, paragraph 1. Gamala, who the text indicates had been ruled by Josephus. Gamala is a city, I believe, who represents a rich man. Josephus, that is. So Gamala is a city shaped like a camel. And he mentions here that camel and rope are the same word in multiple languages, which I assume means Greek and I don't know if that's Aramaic or if that's Latin, but anyway, so camel and rope are the same word, but he says Gamala is a city shaped like a camel, and this is the source of that city's name. Like camel is the source of that city's name, Gamala. And you probably know that G's and C's are pretty much interchangeable. The city also hangs so strangely that it looks as if it would fall down upon itself. So sharp is it at the top. And he gives us a clue here, which is, leading the witness, but it says a metaphor for a cord hung on a needle. Now if we go to Luke 18, verse 25, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Okay, so he's got camel and needle, and Gamala. I wonder if Jesus was at Gamala when he said this. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of